Okay. You've asked, you've begged, you slid into my DMs like butter on a hot cinnamon roll, and today, it's finally happening. Today we are deep diving into the warm, gooey, dangerously delicious world of homemade cinnamon rolls. I'm talking from scratch. No shortcuts, no popping a can open and scaring your soul half to death, just real ingredients, real love, and probably a little too much butter. But that's the point. Now, I won't lie to you. This recipe is not for the faint of heart or the impatient, but when you pull these out of the oven, golden, pillowy, with swirls of cinnamon sugar dreams, you'll feel like a baking champion. Like you deserve a crown, or at least a second helping. So grab your ingredients, preheat your oven, and let's roll, pun aggressively intended, into this recipe because you deserve warm, sticky, freshly baked happiness today. Starting this recipe off, we are going to need to warm this milk to actually get the yeast activated. So the best way I find to warm up my milk is actually heating it up in the microwave. You want to get this milk to about 110 degrees. That's about 45 seconds or so in the microwave. Now that you got your milk to about 110 degrees, you're gonna wanna add 2 teaspoons of active dry yeast. Give this a nice little stir. Make sure all that yeast is kind of dissolved into that nice warm milk. Once you get all of your yeast mixed into your warm milk, you're actually gonna wanna set this off to the side and let some of that yeast and that milk kind of work together. It's actually gonna form like a little foam layer up on top of this milk when it's ready, and that takes about 5 minutes or so. So while your milk is sitting there getting the foam layer and activating that yeast, we're actually gonna start working on the next step. So you're gonna wanna get out a large bowl. We're gonna add 3 1/3 cup of flour. 3 tablespoons of sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt. Now we're just gonna make sure we get all the sugar mixed in with the flour along with the salt. Give it a nice good stir. Once you get all of your dry ingredients mixed, you're gonna wanna set this off to the side as we're not gonna use this quite yet. You're gonna wanna get out another bowl as it has been about 5-10 minutes or so and my milk yeast is totally active. I got this nice foamy, frothy layer on top, which is perfect because that means my yeast is active. And this part is very important as if your yeast does not activate, your cinnamon rolls aren't gonna be very fluffy, so you wanna make sure you got that nice foamy layer on top. So I'm gonna add this to the bowl. 1 beaten egg, 3 tablespoons of water. Once you got all of your wet ingredients all well combined, you're gonna wanna go ahead and pull out your dry ingredients and gently add your wet ingredients to these dry ingredients. Now you're gonna wanna gently mix this all together until a nice dough is formed. So when everything is all well combined, all your wet and dry ingredients, you should have a nice little dough ball that looks something like this. On a lightly floured surface, you're gonna wanna knead your dough for about 10 10 minutes or until a nice, slightly sticky dough ball is formed. Okay, after about 10 minutes of kneading, you should have a nice, like smooth texture dough ball, and it should be a little bit sticky. You know, to the touch, you can feel your hands kind of sticking to it, which this is a very good sign, very good looking dough. Now you're gonna wanna get out another bowl that is lightly greased and put your dough inside. And you're gonna wanna get a tea towel, cover it up, and set this off to the side. And you're gonna wanna let this rise for about 10 minutes or at least until it is double in size. As I've mentioned, this recipe is not for the faint heart or the impatient, as there is a lot of waiting around for the dough to rise, just so you can tear it back down, just to let them rise again. But it's all worth the work, because once it all comes out of the oven and everything is bubbling and sugary cinnamon goodness in there, you'll be glad that you waited around. While we are waiting for the dough to rise, we're gonna go ahead and put together our filling for the cinnamon rolls, which is the most important part, mind you. But we're gonna wanna start off with 3/4 cups of brown sugar, 3 3/4 teaspoons of cinnamon, 2 tablespoons of butter. Now with a pastry cutter or a fork, whichever one you have on hand, you're gonna wanna make sure all that butter is mixed in there with the cinnamon and the brown sugar. You're gonna kinda wanna make it look like almost like a crumble topping. So when all the butter is mixed in with your brown sugar and cinnamon, you should have something that kind of looks like I said, like a crumble topping of just sugary, cinnamony goodness. I wish there was such thing as smell-vision, because I'm not even baking the cinnamon rolls right now, and this smells amazing. And get your dough out, and it is now time to start making some cinnamon rolls. On a lightly floured surface, you're gonna wanna roll your dough out to a nice rectangular shape, about 12 inches long and only about 1/4 inch thick. Once you get your dough rolled out into that rectangle shape, like I mentioned, 12 inches long, about 1/4 inch thick, you wanna get your filling here and sprinkle it on top, making sure all of the surface area is covered. Now that your dough is covered in that cinnamon sugary goodness, now it is time to actually turn these into cinnamon rolls. We're gonna roll these up. Starting on the fat side, start off kind of slow, making sure you're keeping it nice and tight as you're rolling it up. Also kind of keeping it even too as you roll. You're gonna wanna keep these about 1 inch, and it's very important you either use a very sharp knife. I've actually heard, I've never tried it, but you can use like flavored dental floss, and I've seen people use that to cut them. You don't wanna cut them so they kind of like smush down together, as when it's like rising and baking and stuff, they're not gonna puff up and be all nice and fluffy. So it's very important to use a nice sharp knife so you can get a nice clean cut without smashing them down, but should have something that looks like this. Perfect. So I managed to get 12 cinnamon rolls, and those look so beautiful and perfect. I cannot wait to eat these. This is probably one of my little favorite sweet treats that I make. But unfortunately, guys, we are not going to be able to bake these right now, as we are going to actually set these aside and let these rise for about 30 minutes. All right, quick cinnamon roll history while we wait. Cinnamon has been spicing things up for over 4,000 years. Ancient Egyptians loved it so much they used it in perfumes and even in mummification. It was that valuable. And in medieval Europe, cinnamon basically was a status symbol. If you had this at your table, you were living large. Fast forward to Sweden in the 1920s, bakers combined cinnamon, sugar, and butter to create the roll. They even gave it its own holiday, October 4th, aka Cinnamon Roll Day. And then German immigrants brought their own swirly pastries here to America, and naturally we took them, made them bigger, stickier, and covered them in frosting. And that's how we ended up with the over-the-top cinnamon rolls we know and love today. Basically, ancient spices plus Swedish creativity plus America's go big or go home energy equals this delicious masterpiece. Okay, it's been about 30 minutes and these have doubled in size. They are perfect. They are going to be so fluffy and so delicious. You're going to want to bake these at 350 for 25 minutes. While our cinnamon rolls are baking, you're going to want to get another bowl out, as we are going to get ready to make the glaze. 3/4 cups of powdered sugar. 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. 1 tablespoon of milk. Your cinnamon rolls are nicely golden brown and the sugar and cinnamon and butter is all boiling in there. While it is still hot, you're going to want to take your glaze and add it to the tops of these cinnamon rolls, kind of drizzle it on there. You can make it look as fancy as you want. If you want to add a little bit more frosting or glaze to your cinnamon rolls, you can make a whole other batch and actually double this recipe up if you like having that glaze on there, but I just like to have a nice little coating on top. Okay, I think we've reached peak coziness here. These cinnamon rolls, dangerous. I mean, look at them. I don't even know why I made a full batch of these, because I'm about to black out and eat all of these in one sitting. And I fully support you doing the same. Yep. Zero regrets. If you had fun baking with me today, be sure to hit that like button. It lets me know that you're vibing with these kind of videos. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you doing? Come on, let's bake together more often. Drop your next bake in the comments too. I actually read them, by the way. That's why we're here. You all asked for cinnamon rolls. Look at us now. Dream team. All right, see you next time. I'll be here living my best sticky finger life.